The Scots-Irish got here, they found the best lands in the coastal areas were taken. They were the people that pushed across the Appalachians. Remember, the initial wave of immigrants that come to British North America are going to be hemmed in by the Appalachians. It's going to be the Scots-Irish that cross the Appalachians in North Carolina, in Virginia, in Pennsylvania to establish settlements there. Now, the largest non-English ethnic group was also non-European. That was whom? Go ahead, Richards. Yes, the Africans. And they came, they were immigrants, although not, sort of willing immigrants. They were immigrants, and they made up 20% eventually of the colonial population. Okay, what else do we know about any of the regions? New England was healthier than the South. The demographics, Courtney, there was more ethnic. Go ahead, Berhani. So you're saying, dear Berhani, in New England, religion was far more important and central to the lives of the people that lived there. Speaking of that and religion being important in New England, does anybody remember what the halfway covenant was? The halfway covenant. We did not talk about it in class. It was discussed in your book, and it was asked about on one of the tests. Dear Hal Josma, my dear friend. Hal Josma, that's enough to say, close enough to say that's on the edge of being a decent answer. Right? What Hal Josma said is that people weren't attending the Puritan church. The second and third generations of New Englanders had become less pious. And remember, in order to be a member of the Puritan church, to be a baptized church member, you had to argue you were one of the chosen, one of the select, one of the ones that God had picked for salvation. Well, what the halfway covenant said is, well, even if you weren't one of the picked ones, if your parent was one of the picked ones, then you could be baptized in a church member. For some reason, the AP loves the halfway covenant. I think it is it's a signal that religious fervor in New England was kind of waning, and it also connects to sort of the Salem witch trials, which we didn't talk about in class, but is mentioned. But that was also maybe an indication that, religious fervor was kind of dying in New England. And, why was that? Well, because there was witches. It's interesting, Melissa, can I share this with you very quickly? And I think this is wonderful. My daughter goes to Boston University, and some other kids told me this too. When they take Composition 1, the general college writing, instead of taking writing, and I may have told you this before, instead of just taking college writing, we just write whatever. It focuses on a topic. So then there's a big list of college writing 1, and it could be college writing 1, the Salem witches. College writing 1, you pick the topic, and then all the things that you write, to hone your writing skills, deal with that topic. I think that's a wonderful idea, don't you, Samantha? Instead of writing, what did I do over my summer vacation, in college, to learn how to write, you write about some subject area. The reason I thought about that is because my daughter took the Salem witches, which the AP, you'll get a question or two, but that may be a part of this diminishing fervor. What else? What else about the colonial areas? What about the southern colonies? Yeah, go ahead a ways. Pardon me? Yes. What Awais said is the South was more feudal. Let's call it this way, Awais. There was more social stratification in the South. Class stratification, meaning that a distinctive upper class, right? And to some extent, a subservient underclass. Now, in the South, you had the planters, the Tidewater gentry, the large plantation owners who were powerful and rich and owned large, vast estates, largely because of slavery. So slavery very much enhances the stratification of the South. That's definitely the case. I don't know if you could argue this, but if you think about sort of the egalitarianism And that's, you know, people were less, there was less class distinction in New England, more class distinction in the South. I mean, is it sort of eventually set the stage, and the importance of slavery to that stratification, is it sort of set the stage for the Civil War right there during colonization? I mean, the kinds of people that went to the South, the importance of land and slaves and profits there, the importance of religion in New England, the life there, the topography, the geography, the importance of religion. Is it inevitable that those cultural differences that sort of emerge in the United States are going to clash in the Civil War? I mean, not that they would ask anything like that, but if you can make, you know, any kind of connections with that, that's kind of good. Okay, one last thing. One other thing that, you know, distinguished one of the sections of colonial America from the others. Go ahead, Richards. So people lived closer. Yeah, this is the pattern of settlement. The pattern of settlement in New England was in towns and villages that surrounded a church and were connected in a sense of community. Whereas in the South, the further south you went, the further and more widespread the settlements were. Right? The further south you went. That was definitely true. And in Southern Carolina, you had vast rice plantations. Now, I'll tell you something that all of those areas had in common. And what they had in common was they were part of the British Empire. And the British viewed those colonies as a part of a larger system that we called mercantilism. Now, mercantilism is sort of crucial because mercantilism is the ideology, the sort of economic system that the British North American colonies fit into. I mean, Britain was the mother country, and it had various colonial holdings around the world. And 13, now we're really at kind of 12, 13 and eventually, or 12 and eventually 13 of those holdings were in British North America. They and the rest were involved in, you know, part of mercantilism. And the idea of mercantilism was this, that the economic activity of the empire, the British Empire, that's England and its colonies, should be regulated by the government for the good of the empire. So when we talk about economic activity, right, the economic activity of the empire should be regulated by the government for the good of the empire. Now, when we talk about economic activity, what we're talking about is buying and selling, producing, you know, working, all the things that involve people meeting their basic needs. And so mercantilism sort of is this idea that the government of England, the king and the parliament, should pass laws and edicts and taxation that would promote the general good of the empire. Now, we said that general good was defined as a favorable balance of trade. If mercantilism was working, then what it did was create a favorable balance of trade. What a favorable balance of trade means, dear Emery, is that England, the British Empire, would export more than it would import. That was a favorable balance of trade. So laws and rules and things should be passed in order to encourage that. Now, and so in creating a favorable balance of trade, the mother country would have a role and the colonies would have a role. What was the role of the colonies? In a mercantilistic system, whether it was in England, whether it was in France, whether it was in Spain, all of them sort of implemented mercantilism. What was the role of the colonies generally in mercantilism? Does anyone besides the instructor remember? Go ahead, dear Ways. How so? What Dear Ways said for our internet audience was to benefit the mother country. But then I responded by saying, how so? And now he's rocking in his chair. Ways, remember when you wrote that manifesto about fun?
Yes.
That was deep. Go ahead. Continue. Go ahead, Al Josman. Well, how so? Go ahead, Kate.
Like, provide them with raw materials and then buy the finished products from them?
Yes, I mean, the role of the colonies were to do things for the economy that the mother country could not do for itself. Right? So what can't England do? England can't grow tobacco. England can't grow sugar.